What do you feel is the most important thing facing Arkansans right now?
Well, I think most Arkansans are still feeling the pinch of Joe Biden's inflation. Just a few years ago, inflation was almost 10%. That made it harder for people to make ends meet at the end of the month. That's why President Trump and I, along with my colleagues in Congress, have been working so hard to get wages up and to get prices down. Arkansans are going to start seeing bigger paychecks because of the Working Families Tax Cut Act last year. Arkansans are going to pay lower tax rates. They're going to have a higher standard deduction. They're going to have an above the line deduction for things like their weekly contributions to churches. That bill is also going to help bring down energy prices, for instance. So I think that's what most Arkansans right now are worried about the most. It's just the high cost of living in our country. And we're working every single day to try to get prices stable and just as important, try to get wages growing.
Arkansas farmers who grow the crops that feed the world are struggling. The last farm bill goes all the way back to 2018. If you are re-elected to office, what do you plan to do about the lack of a farm bill? What are your plans to help farmers?
Well, there's no question that our farmers are struggling a lot. It hasn't just been a bad year, it's been a generationally bad year. And it's not just one of those generationally bad years, it's been several of them in a row. That's why I've worked with Senator John Bozeman as the chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee to make sure we're getting relief to farm families all across Arkansas. So the first thing we did last summer was pass the Working Families Tax Cut Act, which actually had a new farm bill in it. I like to call it the Bozeman Farm Bill since John Bozeman was the chief author of it. I was proud to support that legislation. Now, that doesn't kick in until later this year. So, a second thing we've done to try to help farm families weather these very tough conditions is the Farmer Bridge Assistance Program that was announced in December. It's going to deliver up to $11 billion of aid to help families get from last season through this season and to the benefit of the new farm bill once it kicks in later this year. A third is working with President Trump on our tariffs. A key policy goal of President Trump's tariffs is to open new markets for our farmers. A lot of countries have very protectionist policy when it comes to agricultural imports because they're trying to protect their own farmers who aren't nearly as productive as our farmers are. So we hope that in the near term to medium term, the tariffs that President Trump has imposed on some of our trading partners and frankly some pretty good friends is going to open new markets to help increase prices by increasing demand for Arkansas farmers' commodities.
Let me go a little bit further. Farmers in our area are facing bankruptcy. Many who didn't plan to stop are having to stop because the bank won't loan them any more money. Meanwhile, the president has given $20 billion to Argentina, and Argentinian farmers are many times in direct competition with our farmers here. Should we be giving money to foreign countries to prop up their economy when people here at home are struggling to hang on to their own livelihood?
Well, Diana, one thing that we're trying to do to make sure that there aren't family farm bankruptcies is that Farmer Bridge Assistance Program. That's where the term bridge comes from. It's designed to get a bridge from last season to this season when the new farm bill kicks in. Again, that's about $11 billion of aid for farmers. I'm still working with Senator Bozeman and the Trump administration to maybe find additional means of relief. I know that our farmers across the state welcome the Bridge Assistance Program, and it'll be enough for some of our families, but it won't be enough for all of them. So we're still working to see if we can identify additional sources of relief. On the point about $20 billion for Argentina, I know the Democrats like to claim that, but it's simply false. What happened is that Argentina, which has the most pro-American government in Latin America, certainly one of the most pro-American governments, was facing a cash crisis. So President Trump, through the Department of the Treasury, offered a $20 billion line of credit. Argentina actually only drew down about $2.5 billion of that line of credit. They have since paid it back in full with interest. So that actually made money for Arkansas taxpayers. And I think it is important, not just in Argentina, but as we've seen what we've tried to accomplish in Venezuela, that we have as many pro-American friendly governments across Latin America as we can to ensure stability, order, and prosperity in our own backyard, because we don't want that instability, disorder, along with crime and drugs spilling across our borders.
Farmers have maintained over and over they want more markets to sell their crops to. What do you plan to do to change that? How can you, as a lawmaker, open up more markets to them and improve exports?
Well, Dinah, that's exactly what President Trump is trying to accomplish with some of these tariffs, is trying to use them as leverage to get more access to foreign markets for our farmers. Obviously, the United States has by far the biggest market in the United States or in the world. We about a quarter of the entire world's economic activities, even though we're a very tiny percentage of its population. Everyone wants to come to the United States. Everyone wants to invest in the United States, even if they are not allowing us to sell our basic farm commodities into their countries. So we've already seen some movement on this front. We hope to see more movement in the near and medium term, that the tariffs will help provide the leverage to make foreign countries open up their markets for the farm products that we grow all across Arkansas.
There are supposed to be antitrust laws in place to protect the agricultural marketplace, but since 2020, seed expenses have increased 18%, fuel and oil by 32%, fertilizer up 37%, and interest rates increased by 73%. These input costs are unacceptable when farmers can't pass the price hikes on to the consumers. What will you do about it?
Well, Diana, a lot of those spikes in input prices go back to the inflation that we saw unleashed during Joe Biden's tenure. It was the worst inflation that we'd seen going back to the late 70s or early 80s. And it takes a while for that kind of inflation to work its way through the system. To take just one example, though, of what we're working on, trying to bring down energy prices. We do that by lowering the price of oil, which means that refined products like gasoline or diesel are going to be lower as well. And fortunately, we've been seeing that happen across the state. We have some of the lowest energy prices in the country. We've been seeing happen across the country. I'd like to see even continued pressure removed from not just our farmers, but families as well when it comes to energy prices. You're right that we have antitrust laws on the books for farmers or for other industries as well. Some of the industries that are selling to our farm families are pre-consolidated. And obviously, if there's any evidence of manipulation of price setting or market allocation, then President Trump's Department of Justice would look very aggressively into it.
The drought during the last growing season in Arkansas hit farmers very hard. Farmers rely on accurate data to protect herds and qualify for the assistance programs. But many times the drought monitor is off and they miss out on data that is crucial. Why does Arkansas not have a state climatologist?
Well, you're right that the drought hit very hard last year, and John Bozeman and I have worked with the Department of Agriculture to try to make sure that our farmers get accurate measurements, get the full benefit of disaster relief payments. I can't speak, Diana, to this or that state position. That's really a question for our governor and our legislature, but I'm confident that Governor Sanders and our legislature is working as hard as we are in Washington, back in Little Rock, to make sure that we're taking care of our farm families.
And turning our attention to healthcare, do you support maintaining or reforming current healthcare subsidies to make health insurance more affordable?
Well, I want to make healthcare more affordable for every Arkansan. And a lot of the subsidies that are in place under Obamacare as it was originally passed are still in place. So if you're making, for instance, less than 400% of the federal poverty level, which is quite a bit more than the average Arkansas household, you're still going to get your insurance subsidized in the Obamacare exchanges. But to be clear, that's only about 5% of all Arkansans. Most Arkansans get their insurance on the job or from Medicare or Medicaid. So what I want to focus on is, rather than a very small percentage of our population that we're getting the enhanced Biden COVID bonuses under Obamacare, and make sure that health care costs are coming down for all Arkansans, to allow them to buy the insurance that suits their needs. You know, that you have different needs if you're single in your 20s, or if you have kids in your 30s and 40s, or an empty nester in your 50s. And I want to make sure that every Arkansan has the choices of insurance products. They have flexibility on things like health savings accounts or flexible spending accounts. These are some ideas that, again, wouldn't focus just on a narrow sliver of our population, but would benefit all Arkansans.
All right. And delving a little bit further, both Republicans and Democrats are criticized for the skyrocketing costs of premiums and deductibles and prescription drugs because both sides have only been able to put short-term fixes in place. What do you believe is a long-term fix for our healthcare problems?
Well, I would dispute that Republicans and Democrats alike bear an equal share of the blame. Much of the increasing cost of health insurance in this country is due to Obamacare. Obamacare has been on the books now for over a decade. Premiums have more than doubled. A lot of deductibles or copays have more than tripled in that period of time. That's again because Obamacare kind of forces a one-size-fits-all insurance on every state and every family and individual for that matter. What I would like to see is more tailored and flexible health insurance that suits the needs of each individual Arkansan as he or she sees fit. On the pharmaceutical drug front, I've worked very hard to try to bring down the cost of basic pharmaceuticals. A lot of drugs can be bought at a fairly cheap price if you get generics on the market after patent protection has run out for what are amazing breakthroughs. Sometimes our government drags its feet on that. You don't get a generic on the market, and especially the second generic, which creates competition between both branded and generic drugs and generic drugs. That's what the evidence shows really brings down the price of drugs for most Arkansans. I'm pleased that the Trump administration agrees with me on this and that we've been working together to make drugs more affordable for every Arkansan.
Americans are hungry. People often say, well, they just need to get a job. But in many cases, they have a job, but most can't make a living wage. Many households are struggling to afford groceries, healthcare, and housing, and all of this in America. Why can our people, even well-educated, employed people, not afford the basics of life?
So much of the high cost of living gets back to the Biden inflation, nearly 10% inflation under President Biden. It takes a long time to get that out of the system. I hear from Arkansans of all walks of life who do struggle. They struggle to buy groceries. They struggle to pay the rent or pay their mortgage, to get insurance on their cars or their homes. We're working to get costs stabilized, and they have stabilized from the worst of the Biden inflation. But on the revenue side of your household budget, trying to get wages up as well, trying to get more money back in into your pocket. That's why, for instance, the Working Families Tax Cut Act will not tax you if you get tax on tips or tax on overtime. If you're a senior citizen living on a fixed income of Social Security, we increase the deduction so everybody has less taxable income. So there's lots of measures taking not just to stabilize the price you pay for all of your household goods, but also to put more money in your pocket to pay those prices.
The One Big Beautiful Bill puts a cap on borrowing for higher education. It excluded nursing from the list of professional degrees, and that could limit students' ability to borrow money for their training. Given the demands in the healthcare sector, is that what should be happening? Why or why not do you believe that?
Well, I think what you've seen in higher education, whether it's college or postgraduate education, is runaway inflation. And this goes back well before Biden as well, because the federal government has been subsidizing at such high degrees. It's no surprise if the federal government says we're going to pay X amount of dollars for everyone's education, that colleges and universities increase their tuition. So what we tried to accomplish is making sure that people, especially low income folks, have access to funds to get to college, but people aren't borrowing money that, again, is just going to go towards colleges and universities. And they may not even have a job market on the back end when they get out. And that we want to make sure that taxpayers are getting a good deal as well, that the taxpayers who are subsidizing all these loans are going to have the loans repaid. Of course, in President Biden's tenure, they kept trying to forgive student loans, which was really just shifting money from hardworking Arkansans who didn't go to college, who, bought a pickup truck and started a landscaping business or worked in contracting or worked at a factory, subsidizing Americans who did go to college and probably have the ability to repay their loans, maybe over a long period of time, just because the federal government subsidizes it so much.